I think it's important. We have a Canadian Coaches Association. I'll go one step further. Maybe it's time we have a National Referees Association to have them have a voice as well, Paul.
Yeah, I think these stakeholders need proper representation, not only so that they can form a consistent approach to messaging, but so that the game can talk to those silos with one voice. Whether or not we need structured associations to represent these groups, I don't know. In my view is we have probably too many associations and too many boards, too many balance sheets and too many AGMs as it is. So I'm not sure whether forming actual separate organizations is necessary. But the underlying intent of your question, I think, is do we need to have these stakeholders better organized, coming together more with a single voice, making sure their issues are on the table and addressed properly, uniformly across the country? I think the answer is no question but yes.
So if I give you a wish, if I give you a magic wand starting 2016, Paul, and I'll ask this to Georgios once we get him on the line again from Spain, we must have lost his line there. What would it be that you would like to see implemented right away? That's something easily implemented in 2016 to help coaches out there in the country of Canada.
Well, you were talking about it earlier with Vic, and I think you were completely correct when we spoke about minimum base level standards across the whole game. We have some standards starting to work their way into the game now. Obviously, programs like OPDL are probably the highest profile components of that. But we still have problems with, at the very basic grassroots entry level of the game, anyone can really go in and coach those players and those teams. And there's reluctance to ask them to do much in terms of qualifications because it's a fear that they won't step forward on that basis. However, other sports have base level standards and still seem to have people come forward and volunteer. And my experience talking to coaches, Anthony, is that they're more looking for things to support them than they are not. So I would like to see, number one, a base level. It doesn't have to be a high level, but a base level minimum qualification level. Every coach, whether they're coaching entry-level house league or higher, must pass in order to be able to get a bag of balls and go coach our kids.
Paul, just before we let you go, we really appreciate your time. When I think of coaching education, I'm not an expert in this area. I've only coached my young kids at the house league and a little bit of reps, so I still don't consider myself an expert. But I think coaching education to me has to be full-rounded, has to be looked at in many different areas. I'm thinking of the psychology aspect. I'm thinking of the nutrition, the athletic aspect, so many other areas, not just the coaching education on the field of a 4-4-2, of different tactics, techniques. I think we need to go deeper in 2015 and in 2016 with these coaches to help them.
Yeah, and I think in fairness, the new LTPD-driven coaching curricula are focusing a little bit more on that. If you look at some of the early stage LTPD courses, they're very much geared towards simple techniques to coach kids at a very young age. So the qualifications seem to be going that way. But at the end of the day, it all matters not if the club doesn't make this a priority. I really feel the most important thing is that clubs put in, when they're doing their budgets at the end of their financial year, they're looking at what to spend on next year. The first item that has to go in there has to be a minimum amount of money to go towards coach education.
So if they don't do that, Paul, if they don't do that, should the province, should the national body step in and say, listen, you have to put this in there or else? Because if they're not going to do it, then they're going to get away with it. Why isn't the provincial body or the national body stepping in and telling these clubs, look, this has to happen?
Well, I would say that certainly in Ontario, they're starting to head that way with the Club Excellence Awards that they have, where they are asking clubs to do a lot more to get that level of recognition of quality. So it's the old carrot versus stick approach to it, Anthony. Governing bodies, you don't want to be having to force clubs to do everything all the time. You really want clubs to see the value in this. But at the end of the day, I think it's just a matter of understanding that if you want registrations, if you want parents to put their kids in your programs, the quality of the coaches matters. And you have to invest in the longer term. Sometimes I think the long-term nature of this gets people a little perturbed because, they don't want to necessarily invest in what can sometimes be 5 to 10 years of annual operating budget to create good coaches. But we see what happens if it's not done. We see, in the OPDL, for example, clubs are forced now to have coaches at a certain level, and that puts pressure elsewhere on their programs. So they have to now take a more three-dimensional and longer-term approach to coach education. So some clubs are starting to do it, but not as many as I think I would necessarily like to see.
Paul, it was real enjoyable having you on. We really appreciate the points you made tonight. It's great that we can all sit down, debate, discuss, because it's important. No one should be throwing mud at anyone, but it is important that we try to get to the crux of the matter to help out these coaches out there so we can have better players for our country and province. Paul, thank you so much again. Happy holidays to you and yours, and don't be a stranger. We'll get you back on in the new year again, my friend.
Yeah, and look, I just wanted to say thank you for doing this topic today, Anthony. As I've mentioned to you before, it's so important, and I'm really pleased that you're taking the time to discuss it on the show tonight, and more than happy to contribute where I can.
Appreciate it. Again, happy holidays. Thanks again, Paul. Take care. Paul Varian, he is with Capitus Consulting. Great of him to join us.